The courtroom was quiet. Sunlight came through the tall windows, but the room felt cold. Everyone sat still. Some whispered, others just waited. Another case. Another man in handcuffs. The door opened. 2 officers walked in with a black man between them. He didn't look angry. He didn't look scared. He just looked tired. His clothes were clean but old. His eyes showed pain, but not fear. People in the room barely looked at him. In their minds, he was just another defendant. Just another man standing in front of a judge. He stood straight, not saying anything. His hands were cuffed. He looked around the courtroom, but his face stayed blank, like he had nothing left to feel. The judge entered. He wore a long black robe. He was older, with gray hair and serious eyes. Everyone stood when he came in. Then they sat again. The judge picked up the file in front of him. He started reading. Name, age, charges, all the usual things. But then he stopped. He looked up. He looked at the man standing there. For a moment, his eyes didn't move. His face changed. Just a little. No one else noticed. But something inside the judge had shifted. He looked down again at the file. Then back at the man. Something was strange. Something was familiar. He stared harder. The man didn't meet his eyes. Suddenly, the judge's mind went somewhere else. He remembered 2 boys, young, full of energy, running through dusty streets. They played with sticks, shared old candy, and made jokes about becoming rich one day. One of them had a loud laugh. The other was quiet, smart, and strong. The judge blinked and came back to the present. Could this man be him? He didn't say a word. He kept his face calm. No emotion. The courtroom continued like normal. The lawyer spoke first. Your Honor, my client pleads not guilty. The judge listened, but his mind was still working. Still remembering. The lawyer said the man was found near a crime scene. Wrong time, wrong place. He had no record, no job, no family around. The judge listened, but now he was looking again. Really looking. The way the man stood. The shape of his face. His eyes. It was him. It had to be. But how? That boy, his best friend from childhood, had disappeared. No one knew where he went. Some said he moved. Some said worse. The judge had gone to college, law school, and then became a judge. He never looked back. But now the past was standing right in front of him. Still, he said nothing. He couldn't. The courtroom had rules. Judges had to be fair. No personal feelings, no past stories. Just the law. So he sat still, calm, watching. The man spoke only once. Yes, Your Honor, he said in a deep, soft voice. That voice, it sent chills down the judge's spine. He hadn't heard it in years, but he would never forget it. Flashbacks. Hit him again. 2 boys sitting on a broken bench talking about the future. 2 boys promising to stay strong, to never let the world break them. Now here they were, one on the bench, the other on the stand. How had life gone so wrong? The judge took a deep breath. He told himself, this is just a case. You're a judge. Be fair. But his heart was not calm. It was racing, because deep down, he knew this was not just another defendant, and this was not just another day in court. Something big was coming, something that would change both of their lives forever. The courtroom became quiet again. Papers shuffled. A guard moved. The sound of a clock. Ticking on the wall was the only thing breaking the silence. But inside the judge's mind, there was no silence. There was only memory. He tried to focus on the case. He tried to listen to the lawyer, to the facts, to the rules. But all he could see was a younger version of that man in handcuffs. A boy with a bright smile and brave heart. The judge closed the file for a moment and looked down. He remembered years ago, before the robe, before the law books, before the courtrooms. There were 2 boys, one black, one white, growing up in the same poor neighborhood, a place where dreams often died young. They didn't have much. No fancy clothes, no big houses, just each other. They were like brothers. Every day after school, they would meet near the broken wall behind the old church. They would share stories, food, and secrets. They would sit for hours talking about their futures. I want to be a lawyer. The white boy had said. "I want to help people too," the black boy replied. Maybe a teacher, maybe a writer. They had big dreams. They promised to never let life pull them apart. But life doesn't always keep promises. One night changed everything. The judge remembered that night clearly. There had been a fight in the neighborhood, loud voices, police sirens, people running. And the next morning, his friend was gone. No one knew where he went. Some said he ran away. Some said he got arrested. Others said he just disappeared. The judge tried to find him at first. He even walked the streets, asked people. But weeks passed. Then months, then years. Life moved on. He finished school, went to college, studied law, became the man people respected. A judge, a man of power, of order, of justice. But the memory of his best friend, it never truly left. And now that same boy, now a grown man, was standing in front of him as a defendant. The judge didn't know what had happened in all those years. He didn't know the pain, the choices, the roads his friend had walked. All he knew was what he saw now. A tired man, silent, strong, holding something deep inside. The judge looked up again. Their eyes met. For a second, the world seemed to freeze. Did the man recognize him too? Maybe. But he looked away. Maybe it was shame. Maybe fear. Maybe he didn't care. Or maybe he did. The judge wanted to speak. He wanted to stop everything and ask, "Where did you go? What happened to you? Why didn't you come back?" But he couldn't. The courtroom had its rules. His job had rules. And rules didn't care about childhood promises. He turned the page in the file. A list of charges: theft, trespassing, suspicion of involvement in a break-in, nothing violent, nothing proven, but enough to bring him to court. The lawyer said he had no job, no stable address, no family on record. He was found near a building that had been robbed. Wrong place, wrong time. The judge wanted to scream. This wasn't fair. This wasn't the boy he knew. Something was missing. Something was wrong. And yet, the system didn't care about who someone used to be. It only cared about what was on paper. Now, still, the judge kept thinking, what had happened after that night? Where did his friend go? Why didn't he reach out? And most of all, why was he back now, standing in front of him like a stranger? The courtroom moved forward. More talking, more papers, more rules. But for the judge, none of it mattered. He had a storm in his heart. The past was standing in front of him, but it wasn't speaking. It was silent, it was watching, and it was waiting. The courtroom clock kept ticking. But for the judge, time felt frozen. He looked at the man again, the defendant, his childhood friend. The man stood there quietly, not moving much, not saying anything, almost like he had accepted whatever was coming. His hands were still cuffed. His face showed no fear, but his silence said everything. The judge wanted to ask so many questions. His chest felt heavy. He couldn't stop remembering those younger days, running around as boys, talking about big dreams, promising to stay out of trouble, but now his friend was in trouble, and he wasn't talking. The lawyer spoke again. "Your Honor, my client has chosen to stay silent during questioning. He will not be making any statements at this time." The judge nodded slowly, but inside he wondered, why? Why won't he speak? Why won't he explain? He had so many chances to say something. Even a few words could change how this case would go. But the man said nothing. It was like he didn't care about his own freedom. Or maybe he had given up long ago. The judge tried to stay calm. He had to look neutral. Judges weren't supposed to show emotion, but it was hard. This wasn't just a stranger. This was someone he once called family. The courtroom doors opened for a moment. A young woman entered quietly, taking a seat in the back. She held a notebook and pen. Maybe a journalist, maybe just curious, but the man didn't even look. He stared ahead, eyes unfocused. Then something small happened, something only the judge noticed. As the lawyer shuffled his notes, the man whispered something under his breath. A name from the past. The judge froze. That name, it hit him like a wave. It was the name of their old hangout, the alley behind the broken wall, a place only they knew, a place where they once made a promise to each other. The judge leaned back in his seat, his heart racing. This man did recognize him. He knew. He had known from the start, but he had stayed silent. Not to protect himself, but maybe to protect the judge. Because if the courtroom knew about their past, everything could fall apart. The judge could be removed from the case. It could be called bias. It could damage his career. So the man said nothing. He was protecting him, even now. That truth hit the judge hard. How could someone who had suffered so much, who had been forgotten by the system, still care about a friend who left him behind? The judge felt shame. He had moved on, built a life, built a name, but he never went back to look for his friend after those early years. He told himself it was too late, that he probably wouldn't find him, that it didn't matter anymore. But now, standing right in front of him, was the boy he had left behind. And that boy had become a man who still remembered, and still protected their bond. The courtroom continued. Dates were being set, motions filed, legal words thrown around. But none of that mattered now. There was a story behind the silence. There was pain behind those eyes. There was truth the world had not heard. And the judge? He knew he had to find it. He had to understand what had happened. The courtroom lights were bright, but the man standing there felt surrounded by shadows. He didn't blink much. He didn't move. But inside, his heart was full of old pain. Pain that didn't show on the outside. The world saw a quiet man, in cuffs. But no one saw what he had been through. No one knew the long road that brought him here, not even the judge sitting in front of him. His childhood friend, the one who used to run with him down dusty streets, laughing under broken streetlights. They had been boys once, almost like brothers. But life had taken them down different roads, and his road had been full of wounds. Years earlier, the night he left changed everything. There had been a fight in the neighborhood. Someone had been hurt. The police came. Fast. Too fast. People were shouting, running, lights flashing, chaos everywhere. And just like that, the young boy disappeared. No goodbye, no explanations, only silence. He didn't run away because he was guilty. He ran because he was afraid. Back then, young black boys in his neighborhood didn't get second chances. They didn't get innocent until proven guilty. They got picked up, blamed, and locked away. So he ran. For days, he slept in a broken bus behind an old building, cold, hungry, alone. Then he got on a train. No ticket, no plan. Just a broken heart and a hope that maybe, somewhere, things would be better. But they weren't. He bounced from one shelter to another, from one job to another. Sometimes he worked in kitchens, sometimes he cleaned streets, sometimes he slept outside. He was smart, but nobody saw that. He had dreams, but dreams don't feed you when your stomach is empty. Years passed. He learned to fight, not with his fists, but with silence, with patience, with strength. He never went to jail. He never caused trouble, but trouble still found him. Like the night the police stopped him just for walking home. Like the day he lost his job because someone accused him of stealing, without proof. He got used to being blamed. He got used to being invisible, until one day he walked past a building. Big, tall, clean windows, a courthouse, and inside, he saw him on the news, on a poster, the boy from his past. Now a judge, the friend he hadn't seen in years, and for the first time in a long time something moved inside him. He didn't feel hate, he didn't feel anger, he felt something strange, something like hope, back to the present. Now he was standing in that same courthouse, in front of the boy who had once called him brother, and he stayed silent. Not because he was guilty, but because he wanted to protect something that still mattered to him. The judge watched him closely. He could feel something was hidden, something deep. He wanted to speak, to ask, to break the silence, but he couldn't. He had to wait. Then, during a break, something happened. One of the guards said, "You want water?" The man nodded. The guard walked him down a quiet hallway. As they passed a door, the judge stepped out. Their eyes met, just the two of them. No lawyers, no papers, no courtroom noise, just silence. Then, the man finally spoke. "I never blamed you," he said softly. "I just couldn't come back." The judge didn't say anything. His lips trembled slightly. "I saw your face that day," the man continued. "I knew you'd recognize me, but I couldn't speak. Not yet." The judge nodded once. No words. The guard returned. The moment ended, but something had changed. The silence had cracked. And now, the truth was beginning to rise. Hidden wounds don't stay hidden forever. The courtroom was quiet again. Everyone had returned after a short break. Papers shuffled. The lawyer cleared his throat. The guard stood still. But something had changed. The judge's eyes no longer looked at the defendant like he was just another case file. He saw him now, truly saw him, not as a suspect, not as a number, but as the boy who once saved him from a gang beating behind the schoolyard, as the friend who once gave him half his sandwich when he had nothing to eat. And now, that same friend stood in front of him, alone, silent, accused. But not defeated. The lawyer stepped forward. "Your Honor," he said, "we would like to introduce new evidence." The judge nodded. The defense attorney walked over to a screen and clicked a remote. A video began to play, the security footage from the night of the break-in. It was dark and blurry at first, but then shapes appeared. 2 figures running, one of them breaking a window. The other, just standing there. The man on trial was the one standing still. He wasn't part of the crime. He was just there, trying to stop it. The video showed him yelling at the other man, trying to pull him back, but the second man ran away. The man on trial stayed behind, looking confused, and then sat down on the curb. That's when the police arrived. They didn't ask questions. They didn't check the cameras. They saw a black man outside a broken building, and they made their choice. They arrested him. The room was silent as the video ended. The judge sat back, shaken. He looked down at the file again. The file that said suspect. The file that had nothing about the truth in it. And now, the truth was right in front of everyone. The man wasn't guilty. He had tried to stop a crime and paid the price for just being there. The judge's voice was low but firm. "Why didn't you say any of this before?" he asked. The man looked up. His voice was calm, soft. "Because no one ever listens?" The courtroom felt heavy. A whisper of guilt moved through the air. No one could look him in the eye, except the judge. And what he saw in those eyes wasn't anger. It was pain. Years of being unheard. Years of being judged without a voice. Judge leaned forward. "I'm listening now." That night, the judge sat alone in his office. The courtroom was dark now. The halls were empty, but he couldn't leave. His heart was too full. He pulled out an old photo from a drawer. 2 boys standing in front of a school, smiling, one white, one black, arms around each other. He hadn't looked at that photo in years. Tears filled his eyes. He had taken the road with lights, titles, power. His friend had taken the road with silence, struggle, and wounds. But somehow, they both ended up in the same room. Again, destiny, maybe, justice. Not yet, but it was coming because now the truth was out. And the judge was ready to make things right. The sun was still rising when the man returned to the courtroom. His hands were no longer cuffed, but the weight he carried could still be seen in his eyes. The night before had been long. He hadn't slept. Not because he was afraid, but because he was remembering. Remembering everything. The streets that raised him, the faces that ignored him, the doors that never opened. And now, the one door that could finally lead to his freedom was in front of him, the courtroom door. He walked through it with slow steps. Inside, the judge was already sitting. His face was serious, but softer than before. He had thought about everything all night. The photo, the video, the silence, and most of all, the friendship that still lived beneath the years and pain. The courtroom was full. Reporters, onlookers, even some people from the man's old neighborhood who had come to see what would happen. Everyone was watching. The defense lawyer stood tall, confident. "We ask for full dismissal of all charges," he said. "My client did nothing wrong. He was arrested for being there, not for committing a crime, and the evidence proves it." The judge looked at the papers in front of him, then at the man, then at the crowd. He knew this moment wasn't just about law. It was about justice. Real justice. The kind that looks beyond skin color. The kind that listens, the kind that remembers. He took a breath. This court, he said, finds no reason to proceed with the charges. Case dismissed. The room gasped. Some clapped softly. Some sat frozen. But the man, he just stood there. No smile, no celebration, just quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after a long storm. Later that day, the man stepped outside the courthouse. The sky was clear. Fresh. Air. Freedom. But it didn't feel like victory. Not yet. The judge followed him outside. They stood a few feet apart. Neither spoke at first. Then the judge said, "I'm sorry." The man looked up. "Not just for today," the judge added. "For not finding you sooner. For forgetting where we started." The man nodded. "We both made choices. Yours just took you further." "I never stopped wondering what happened to you," the judge said. "I thought maybe you made it out. Better than me?" The man smiled, but it was a tired smile. "I made it out. Just not the way you think." They stood in silence again. Then the judge held out his hand. It shook slightly. The man looked at it for a moment, then reached out and shook it. It wasn't a full repair, but it was a start, a spark, a small piece of redemption for both of them. Back in the neighborhood, the news spread fast. People talked. Some were surprised. Others nodded like they already knew. Because they remembered the boy who always tried to help others, even when he had nothing. A group of kids passed by him on the street. One of them looked up and said, "Hey, aren't you that guy from the courthouse?" The man smiled and nodded. The kid said, "You beat the system?" The man paused. "No," he said. "I survived it." And that was more than enough. It had been 3 days since the courtroom doors closed behind him. 3 days since he walked free, but freedom doesn't always feel like peace. The man had spent years surviving, not living. Now he was learning how to breathe again. The city hadn't changed much. The noise, the faces, the speed. But something inside him had changed for the first time in a long time. He wasn't hiding. One morning, he returned to the old neighborhood. The same cracked sidewalks, the same faded walls. But now, people looked at him differently. Not with fear, not with judgment, but with respect. A small crowd of young boys played near a fence. They paused when they saw him. One of them whispered, "That's him, the guy from the courthouse, the one who stood up for himself." Another kid called out, "You really didn't do it, huh?" The man chuckled softly. "Not everyone they, Arrest is guilty, son." The kids nodded, slowly understanding something bigger than just a courtroom story. Something about injustice and dignity, and never giving up. Later. That day, he visited a community center that had been shut down for years. He used to play there as a boy. Now, it was filled with silence and dust, but he didn't see what it was. He saw what it could be. Sat down with a local leader. "I want to open this place again," he said. "Make it a space for kids like we used to be. Somewhere safe." The woman smiled, tears in her eyes. "No one's ever come back with a plan like that," she said. "Most just leave and forget." He nodded. "I almost did." Meanwhile, the judge sat in his office, staring at that old photo again. 2 boys with scraped knees and dreams. Too big for the block they were raised on. He picked up the phone and dialed. The man answered. Neither of them spoke for a second. Then the judge said, "How's the center going?" The man replied, "It will take work, but I've had worse odds." "I'd like to help," the judge said. A pause. Then, "You sure you want to be part of this side of town again?" The judge replied softly, "It's the only part that ever taught me who I really was." Weeks later, the community center had a new name painted on the wall. Second Chance Hall. Kids filled the place. Laughter echoed inside. There was music. Books. A boxing bag in the corner. Computers donated by a few friends of the judge. The man stood in the hallway, watching it all. He didn't wear a suit. He didn't wear a badge. But he had something more powerful than both. He had purpose. The story ends. But not really. Sometimes life splits people apart. Sometimes it brings them back. Not to where they were, but to where they're needed. The man once stood in court as a defendant. Now he stood as a mentor, a protector, a leader, and the boy, who once sat beside him in class, now stood beside him in cause. They were no longer just stories in a file.